In today's video, we're going to talk about trading pieces in chess, when we should be trading, when we should avoid trading, and various different bishop versus knight trades that will help you understand how to make better decisions so you're able to get better positions. Timestamps are in the description. Enjoy the video. First things first, I want to talk about a rule that I've already talked about, and that is called to take is a mistake. So let me show you an example of it. So after e4, black goes e5. We go knight to f3, knight to c6, d4. After e d4, knight d4, we get to this position right here. Now in this position, black can play this move, knight takes d4. At first glance, this might look like a fair trade because this knight is worth 3 points. This knight is also worth 3 points. Is this a fair trade? And the answer is no. And this is where the rule of to take is a mistake comes in. You never want to make trades that will help your opponents develop. In this case, if black takes on d4, white takes with the queen, and now white develops the queen. And if we were to talk about this in sort of a rougher terms, if I go back in this position, white has one piece developed, black also has one piece developed, and after this exchange, white still has one piece developed and black has 0 pieces developed. So in this position, black is lacking in development. Let's say black plays queen to f6 in this position, and here, do we want to take on f6? Once again, to take is a mistake. Queen f6 only helps black because black is able to develop the knight. Instead, we can move the queen away, or we can even play a move like bishop to e3. This is not even the best move. However, it is still a fine move, and it is certainly better than taking on f6, because if in this position black takes you, in this case, at least you are the one that is developed and your opponent has not moved anything yet. So make sure to avoid trades that help your opponents develop. To learn more about this rule, check out my other video that I posted a couple of days ago about to take is a mistake. I talked about this rule extensively. The link will be in the description. Another important principle that we have to talk about when it comes to trading pieces is that if you're up in material and if you want to push a position for a win, you want to trade pieces. And if you're the side that is trying to defend, you want to trade pawns. So in this position, let's say white plays this move b3. b3 would be a huge mistake. You do not want to be trading pawns when you're the side that's trying to push for a win. After a b3, this position is going to be very hard to win after rook to d4. Now, it is still potentially winning after rook b2, rook behind the passed pawn. While it is certainly better for the white pieces, however, it is difficult to win this position. But there is a better way to handle this position. Instead of playing like this, what you can do is play this move bishop to c6, attacking this rook and attacking this pawn. Let's say rook goes to d4. Now you will go rook e4, and black is forced to make a trade here. If black moves away, you will capture the pawn. The two pawns are simply going to be winning because these pawns are going to be stopped very easily by the rook and the bishop, and these two pawns will dominate the rook on d6. So in this position, white is going to be winning very, very easily, and that is because white threatened a rook trade. If the rooks came off the board, this would still be winning for the white pieces, because how do you win here with black? What do you do here with black? You can't win with black. If you go f5, bishop c6, you're going to lose this pawn. Even if you go a3 after ba3, this pawn will be very difficult to stop. If you just simply keep pushing pawns, bishop takes a4, the king will stop the pawns with the help of the bishop, and these two pawns will be able to get through, and this is a completely winning position for the white pieces. So the main takeaway here is that offer a piece trade whenever you're the side that's trying to win, and offer a pawn trade, or take a pawn trade in this case, if you're the side that's trying to draw. Next principle I want to discuss is to trade off your bad pieces for your opponent's good pieces. So in this position, after e4, e6, let's say we have the French defense. Let's say we have the advanced French. Black plays bishop to d7, we play bishop d3, black plays a6. In this position, we should be very careful with the white pieces. If we play a move like knight to f3, what will happen is that black can play this very pesky move, bishop to b5. Now, bishop to b5 is a strange move. Why would you move your piece multiple times in an opening? However, there are some ideas here that are very interesting. First and foremost, the center is locked, so making multiple moves with the same piece is not as bad because the center is locked, the king will not be attacked immediately, you're not in any immediate danger as the black pieces, so at least you can afford to make moves like this, not forever, but for this case. And secondly, this is a bad bishop. This is the French bishop for black. If we go back, this is the bishop that's always bad in the French defense. It's blocked in by the pawns. It has nowhere else to go. It is a bad piece. And in this position, what black decides to do is to get rid of it early, because this bishop on d3 is the theoretically good bishop for the white pieces. Why? The pawns are mainly going to be set up on the dark squares. You're going to have a potential kingside attack with the white pieces. This bishop will be a powerful attacker. However, black gets rid of it early by doing this maneuver, and black is able to get rid of white's good piece by trading off his bad piece. So this is a beneficial trade for the black pieces. Let me show you another example of this. In this position, white's pieces are set up quite well. The bishops are perfect, the queen is good, the rook is good, the knight is good. The only two pieces in this position that are not as good are the knight on d2 and the rook on c1. Now you could improve this rook, you could play rook to d1. This is also a very reasonable move. You could also play this move knight to e4, because you know that you're gonna go rook d1 on the next move, so you free up the d file, because if you go rook d1 right away, maybe there's rook e8 and it gets a little bit uncomfortable. You can still play knight e4 here, by the way, but if you start with knight e4, you get rid of your bad piece for black's good piece. This knight on f6 is quite good because it is a key defender of the black pieces, and there's not much that black can do here. If black takes on d4, white captures back. Now there's an attack here, so this attack has to be dealt with. Let's say g6. Now you go rook d1, and the whole black position is under fire. White is significantly better here. So by trading off your bad piece for black's good piece, you were able to start a massive attack here with the white pieces. Let me show you yet another example, and let's go to this position right here. So in this position, let's say white plays this move knight to e3. The goal here for the white pieces is to play knight to d5. And let me tell you something, there's only one good move in this position, and that move is bishop to h6. Why? Because now you're basically going to be forcing a trade with the black pieces, because if the knight goes to d5, of course the rook is going to be lost. This is very bad for the white pieces, so white has to deal with his knight being traded off, and there's not much white can do about this. After bishop takes, rook takes, black is able to get into this position, which is significantly better than what could have happened, let's say, if we were to not make this exchange, and if we were to play, let's say, a move like king to f8, or just a random move, let's say like rook b8 to defend the pawn and then push it to b5, b4, knight to d5, and this position is terrible. You can no longer trade the bishop for the knight. White has a very strong knight versus a bad bishop, and this is very, very uncomfortable for the black pieces. However, if you go to h6 right away, let me go back. If you go to h6 right away, you're able to get rid of your bad bishop for your opponent's good knight, and this position is significantly easier to deal with than the previous one. So make sure to trade off your bad pieces for opponent's good pieces. Next principle I want to talk about is to trade off defenders when you're trying to attack, and trade off attackers when you're trying to defend. So in this position, black plays this move b4. Now, do we go forward with knight d5 or do we go back? In this case, going forward to d5 is the correct decision. Why is that? That is because the knight on f6 is a crucial defender of the king alongside the bishop on g7. So after knight d5, we can actually throw in bishop g7, king g7, and bishop d5 The rook has to move, rook b8, but now the king has 2 less defenders than he had before. The knight on f6 is gone, the bishop on g7 is gone. We continue our attack with h4, and if black goes h5, we go g4 and we strip the king open with a move like h5. Or if black chooses to do something else, it's very difficult to do something. The best thing to do is probably to go h6 and then g5, but even here there's f4, and there is still a massive attack on the black king, which is very difficult to stop. Let's say e6 is played, we would even throw in this check, or we would go bishop to c4, drop this back, and this king is just simply very weak. We would take on d6, we would attack the rook, attack the pawn on f4, and even if this win does not necessarily result in a checkmate, if this attack does not result in a checkmate, it will result in white having more material and more activity. Now, on the same note, if you're the side that's trying to defend, you want to trade off attackers. Knight to c6, offering a queen trade. Should white trade the queens? No, white's trying to attack. Why would white want to trade the queens? If white trades the queens off, this only helps black because now the attack is gone. Let's say white plays this move queen to h3. Now we will go knight d4. Now we are offering a trade of the knights. This knight is not necessarily an attacker right now. However, it could become a potential attacker after knight g5, f5. There is some danger, and there is a possibility that this knight becomes a very dangerous piece. Why not just trade it off? Knight d4, offering a knight trade, and there's not much you can do here because the c-pawn is also under attack, and if you trade here with the white pieces, after cd4, knight e2, the c-file is open, the c2 pawn is weak, and this position is going to be very difficult for white to defend. Another principle you have to keep in mind is to trade off pieces when you have less space. So for example, after e4, c6, let's say white plays knight to f3. Here we go d5 and we get an advanced Caro-Kann. However, in this case, we don't have to put our bishop on f5. We can actually put our bishop on g4. And this allows us to trade our bishop off for the knight. And since we have less space in this position, it is actually beneficial for us to do so, because then we are going to be able to develop normally. Now, the typical continuation here with the white pieces is to actually go d4 and then go e5, because here the light square bishop has to go to f5. It cannot go to g4 to pin the knight because the knight's not on f3 yet. And in this position, now the bishop is on f5. This is actually an inferior placement for the bishop. That's why most grandmasters in this position play bishop e2 and not bishop d3. They don't allow black to trade off pieces because black has less space. Black is struggling to develop, and this square on f5 is going to be very important for the knight, because this knight on g8 will want to end up on f5, eventually pressuring the pawn on d4. So this bishop will have to move, and it gets clunky for the black pieces because black has less space and black has to develop a specific way. That is why in this position it is better to go bishop to g4 and trade the bishop off for the knight. And this is a very powerful position for the black pieces. Not winning, but it is very nice because black already equalizes, because black gets rid of his weak piece and gets very, very easy development. If you want to know more about space advantage, how to use it and how to deal with it, check out my video on it. The link will also be in the description because this is a topic that needs to be discussed in depth. Another important principle that you have to remember is that if you capture a knight and the other knight can replace it, then you don't necessarily want to make that exchange. So for example, in this position, it is white to move. Let's say white plays knight to d2. We go c5, striking in the center, normal Caro-Kann stuff. And here white plays this move h3. So in this position, do we want to capture on f3 or no? If in this case, if we capture, that's actually not beneficial for us, because after bishop f3 the knight will simply take back and there's nothing that we have accomplished. We have not done anything. However, if we go back here, we still maintain the pressure. Now you might ask, in this position, doesn't white have more space? So would it not make more sense to take here on f3? That is true. However, in this case, because white played this move knight to d2, the development is a bit awkward, so you don't necessarily want to allow this knight to move involuntarily, and you don't want to allow this bishop to develop normally. So that's why you actually benefit from keeping these pieces the way they are placed. And if white chooses to go g4, that would actually be a fairly serious mistake, because we would strike back with h5, fight against this structure. If g5 is played, that weakens f5, then we can maneuver our knight over there, and this is a very strong position for the black pieces. Now, in my opinion, one of the most important principles and one of the most important reasons to take in positions like this is to win time. Now, after h3, our bishop is under attack, but there is a tactic in this position, and what I want you to notice is that if we go queen b6, we will attack the pawn on d4, and we will attack the pawn on b2. So this knight that defends the pawn on d4 can be removed with bishop takes f3, and then we play queen b6, and we're attacking both of these pawns at the same time. Of course, white cannot defend both. Now, the thing is, when we take, what I want you to notice is that it is our move. If we were to go back, for example, if we were to play this move, bishop to h5 in this position, it is no longer our turn. It is now white to move, and white can take measures to defend these two pawns, and we don't have time to attack them anymore. That is why in some tactical situations you can make moves like this. Even though typically this is not a good positional decision, it is good tactically because we threaten things over here. Now, in this case, computer says that h6 is the best move, and then after takes there is some queen takes, and there are some issues here for the white pieces. However, if we were to actually follow some logic, and if we were to attack both of these pawns, you would notice that we are actually winning a pawn here. After knight e2, queen b2, we get into a position like this, and taking on b7 doesn't help white that much because we can develop very quickly. So we are winning material in this position, and that is because we took on f3. Sometimes you can make bad positional moves if they have a tactical justification, and you need to take on f3 in order to win time so you can attack these pawns quickly. Yet another very important principle is to not trade for no reason. So in this position, once again, the bishop on g4 is under attack, but do we want to take? No, because it doesn't give you anything. Yeah, that's literally it. It doesn't give you anything. If you take, white just simply takes back, and you have accomplished nothing. In this position, you need to just retreat. Sometimes that's just enough of a reason. If you don't see a reason why you should take, don't take. Sometimes you can take and damage the structure for the side that has the knight. So in this position, after a3, we can take on c3 and we damage white's pawn structure. And I'm not going to go too far into the details. What black does is black plays c5, and then eventually what will happen is that black will pile up pressure on this pawn on c4, and this is how the game goes. However, when you damage the structure, that doesn't mean that you're automatically winning. So for example, after bishop takes c3, it doesn't mean that black is automatically winning here. You still need to utilize the fact that these pawns are doubled, and you still need to play around them. There are many examples of this. So for example, in this position, this was the bird's opening, by the way. I'm just going to show the opening moves. Bishop to b5 here, a6, and then captures on c6. This is once again another situation when the pawns are doubled, and we can actually play against them by playing moves like knight e5 and attacking them later on in the game. We don't have to do that right away. We can do it like way later, as you can see, just like this. And the main thing about the doubled pawns is that sometimes you're not going to be able to win them, but the fact that they are doubled creates problems for black in this case, because black's pawns are doubled, because black is struggling to execute pawn breaks. So for example, in this structure, when the pawns are not doubled, this pawn, or that's on a5, it goes to a6, the doubled pawn goes to b5, and then c4 is the main pawn break that black executes. but because the pawns are doubled, that is simply more difficult to accomplish. So sometimes you can take pawns and damage the structure, but you also need to study these structures and you need to know how to utilize these doubled pawns and how to play against them effectively. Another example is in the Spanish, just like this. However, in this position, if they play a move like a6, taking is actually not very helpful for the white pieces, because even if you think you're winning this pawn, you're not really winning this pawn. If you take it, there's queen d4. If you don't take it, then okay, black will simply defend and you will get into a position like this where black has the two bishops and you don't have the two bishops, although these pawns can be bad in the long run. So you can take and damage the structure. Let me go back to the previous position here. Let me just go back here. Sometimes you can take and damage the structure, but you need to know how to utilize this damaged structure and how to play against it. And lastly, if you're going for queen for two rooks kind of a trade, you want to make sure that your rooks are going to be coordinated. So in this position, the best move for white is to take on e8 and then once again take the rook on e8. And here white has two rooks for the queen, and after a move like rook to d7, this rook will go to e7, and this is very much a winning position for the white pieces. Why is that? That is because the two rooks are able to coordinate on the 7th rank. However, if there's a lot of chaos in the position, if there was a lot of chaos in the position, that would benefit the queen. Queen loves chaos, and it actually doesn't matter whether white has rooks here or maybe even whether white has three minor pieces. Sorry, I skipped too far forward here. So in this position, let's say we go into a situation like this where white is able to get three pieces for the queen. This position is also much better for the white pieces because all the minor pieces are able to coordinate very easily. They're centralized, they're coordinated, they're defending each other, and this is going to be a better position for white because of how stable white's position is, and the position is not chaotic at all because there's nothing that's really going on here for the black pieces. White is the one that's attacking. White has all the dynamics while black doesn't have much here. The only thing black has is the semi-open c-file, and even that's not doing anything. Whenever you have a queen, make sure the position is chaotic if you have a queen versus three pieces, or if you have queen versus two rooks, because if something like this happens, white is simply going to be winning because the rooks are going to coordinate. So you need to be very, very careful as the black pieces.